Today I'm going to tell you about a story that shook the entire USSR. In 1959, in the Sverdlovsk region of the USSR, a group of students decided to go on a hiking trip. The preparation was serious, almost military in nature. The route they chose was of Category 3 difficulty, the highest at the time, and was to traverse the northern Urals, from the village of Izhay to Mount Otorten, spanning over 300 kilometers. What drove these talented young people, each with a promising career ahead, to embark on such a risky journey? Was it mere sporting zeal, or something more? Every participant passed a medical examination, and all had experience with winter hikes. Equipment was gathered meticulously: special double-walled tents, down sleeping bags, a portable stove, burzwika, 2 still cameras and 1 movie camera, key of 16, compasses, maps, and 2 weeks' worth of food. Interestingly, among the gear were even homemade skis, crafted in the Institute's workshops. The group's composition was diverse and interesting. Igor Dyatlov, 23, leader, radio engineer. Zinaida Kolmogorova, 22, radiotechnical faculty student. Ludmila Dubinina, 21, student, the only one with Arctic expedition experience. Alexander Kolevatov, 24, nuclear physics specialist. Nikolai Thibault-Brignol, 23, construction worker, war veteran, the physically strongest. Yuri Doroshenko, 22, radio operator. Georgy Krivonischenko, 24, geological engineer. Rustam Slobodin, 23, engineer. Semyon Zolotaryov, physical education teacher. Yuri Yudin, 22, the one destined to survive. Yes, there was supposed to be a 10th member. Yuri Yudin fell ill with sciatica and left the route on January 28 in the village of Severoralsk. He would later say, "If I had known what awaited them, I would have crawled after them on my knees." Would the course of events have changed if he had stayed? Or did fate truly spare him that time? On January 23, 1959, the group departs from Sverdlovsk, now Ekaterinburg, by train. Surviving photographs show smiling young people. They joke, laugh, and make plans. On one photo, Dyatlov writes, "Start of the route. Great mood." The route passed through Idel, then by truck to the village of Izhay, the last settlement. On January 31st, they send their final telegram to the UPI Sports Club. "Have started the route. All is well. Dyatlov." But were there already oddities at this stage? Local residents later recall that the hikers looked tired even before the active part of the trek began. Some of the Mansi, indigenous people, allegedly warned them not to go to that mountain, calling it Yalping Nair, Mountain of the Dead. But in the atheistic Soviet era, such warnings were usually ignored. The first days of the hike went according to plan. They covered 15 to 20 kilometers per day, camped in the forest, and kept a diary. Preserved records show the usual hiking routine. February 2nd. Covered 15 kilometers, strong wind. Made camp by a stream. Kolya Thibault-Brignol cooked dinner. Temperature minus 25 degrees Celsius. By February 1st, they reached the tree line and began ascending the slope of Mount Kolit-Syakhl. It was here, according to the diary, that they began to face difficulties. The wind grew stronger, the snow deeper. Why didn't they stop in the forest, where there was shelter from the wind? Perhaps they wanted to stay on schedule, or was something urging them on? Evening, February 1st. By all hiking conventions, when weather deteriorates, one should either return to the forest or stop and wait it out. But the group makes a strange decision. They climb higher and pitch camp right on the open slope, at an altitude of about 1,079 meters above sea level. Why? What made experienced hikers violate basic safety rules? They wanted to save time. The next day's trek to Mount Otorten was long. Igor Dyatlov might have made the decision under group pressure. Some members were eager to push forward. They planned a survival training session in extreme conditions. This was practiced among experienced hikers. Something on the slope caught their interest, perhaps an unusual natural phenomenon or traces of something strange. Evidence from the diary. The last entry was written by Yuri Krivonishenko. Settled in for the night. Visibility poor, windy, but spirits are high. Should reach the summit tomorrow. No alarming hints. And what about what they might have seen? Local residents later told investigators about fiery spheres observed in the sky around those days. But could student technologists have been frightened by the northern lights or other atmospheric phenomena? Reconstruction showed the tent was pitched skillfully, skis were used as supports, the edges were banked with snow. Inside, belongings were arranged, and wet clothes were hung to dry. Judging by food remains, they dined on canned stew and tea. The film, developed later, showed the last frames. Someone brushing teeth with snow, someone adjusting the stove, Dyatlov writing something in the diary. Around 1900 hours, they likely went to sleep. The outside temperature dropped to -30 degrees Celsius. Wind speeds reached 15 to 20 meters per second. But inside the tent with the stove, it should have been relatively warm, around 0 degrees Celsius. And what was happening in neighboring areas? An interesting fact, that same evening, 50 kilometers away, another hiking group observed strange orange spheres in the sky. Military units in the region were conducting exercises. Weather stations recorded unusual atmospheric phenomena. Between 2100 hours and 23:00, something made them wake up and flee the tent in panic. And they did so hastily that they didn't have time to dress. Some were only in their underwear and socks. They cut the tent from the inside in several places, meaning exiting through the entrance would have taken too long. Or was the entrance blocked by snow? Only on February 26 did the search party discover their tent on the slope of Mount Kolytsyakul, which translates from Monsi as Dead Mountain. The scene was strange and alarming. The tent was slit from the inside, as if people had rushed to leave in panic. Inside, all belongings remained, warm clothes, food, documents. Outside, skis lay stuck in the snow. But where were the hikers themselves? The tracks leading from the tent told their ominous story. Barefoot or in just socks, some only in underwear, people had run down the slope toward the forest. In -40 degrees Celsius frost. What could have made them abandon a warm tent and run out practically naked into the icy wind? Approximately 1.5 kilometers from the tent, under a large cedar at the forest's edge, searchers found the first bodies. Yuri Doroshenko and Georgy Krivonishenko lay by the remains of a fire. They wore minimal clothing. The cedar trunk bore marks up to 5 meters high, as if someone had tried to climb it. Broken branches lay nearby. But why did they light a fire here instead of returning to the tent? And what made them climb the tree? Some time later, the bodies of Igor Dyatlov, Zina Kolmogorova, and Rustam Slobodin were found. They lay in a straight line between the tent and the cedar, as if trying to return. Slobodin had a skull fracture, but this injury was not fatal. All 5 died from hypothermia. The 4 remaining bodies were found only in May, when the snow melted. They lay in a stream, 75 meters from the cedar, in a natural depression. But their condition shocked even experienced investigators. Nikolai Thibault-Brignol had a crushed skull. Ludmila Dubinina, multiple rib fractures, and a missing tongue, later determined to be the result of post-mortem decomposition. Zolotaryov, similar chest fractures. All 3 were better dressed than the others. They wore clothing taken from their deceased comrades. What was this? Why did 3 suffer such horrific injuries, while others died simply from cold. The investigation, launched into the group's death, faced a paradox. On one hand, obvious panic that made people flee the tent. On the other, no visible external threats. No signs of wild animal attacks, no traces of other people. The avalanche theory seemed logical at first. It was assumed the hikers heard the noise of an approaching avalanche and in panic cut the tent to escape quickly. But examination showed the slope angle was insufficient for an avalanche, the snow cover was stable. Plus, why didn't they return after the danger passed? Military tests theory. The area where the group perished was closed to visitors. It later emerged that missile tests were conducted nearby. Some researchers suggest the hikers may have accidentally witnessed secret tests and were eliminated. But then why create such a complex scene? And why did some have injuries characteristic of a shockwave? The infrasound hypothesis. Physicists proposed an interesting hypothesis. Under certain conditions, wind blowing over mountain ridges can create infrasonic waves of about 7 Hz. This sound is inaudible to the human ear, but causes panic, inexplicable fear, and a desire to flee. Could infrasound have driven the group to abandon the tent in terror? Several facts fit no theory. Radiation was detected on some of the deceased's clothing. Local Muncie residents reported strange lights in the sky that night. One of the group's cameras produced overexposed shots on the last roll. Some of the hikers' watches stopped at different times. What unusual thing could they have seen that February night? The slab avalanche theory. One modern theory, receiving scientific backing in 2021, is a snow slab avalanche. Russian and Swiss researchers modeled the slope conditions and concluded a snowboard could have formed, a dense layer of snow that slides downhill under certain conditions. Its impact on the tent could have injured part of the group, while the rest ran down in panic. But does this explain all the oddities? Why were some almost undressed? And why were those with terrible injuries separated from the others? The human factor. Analyzing the events, one cannot exclude the human factor. Perhaps something first happened that forced the group to leave the tent. In panic, they ran toward the forest, where 2 began lighting a fire. 3 tried to return for belongings but froze on the way. And the 4 who remained by the fire sustained injuries later, maybe from a snow mass falling from the cedar or from attempts to build a shelter. But then why didn't they use skis to construct a shelter? And why didn't they try to return to the tent during daylight? Even today, over 60 years later, questions remain unanswered. Why did they cut the tent from the inside? A knife was at hand, but they could have simply unzipped the entrance. It seems they were saving seconds. Why did they scatter in different directions? This doesn't resemble an organized retreat by an experienced group. Where did the radiation come from? The explanation that it could have been from watches with luminous dials isn't fully convincing. What did witnesses see? Other hiking groups reported strange orange spheres in the sky over the Urals in those days. Why was the case classified? Investigation materials were labeled secret until the 1990s. The Dyatlov Pass Incident left a deep mark. The pass where their tent stood now bears Dyatlov's name. Every year, hikers come here to honor the memory of the deceased. Documentaries and feature films have been made, books written, and websites created about the case. The victims' relatives searched for answers until the end of their lives. Ludmila Dubinina, mother of one of the deceased girls, said, "I don't need the guilty. I need to understand what happened to my daughter in the last hours of her life." In 2019, the Prosecutor General's Office of Russia resumed the investigation. The official commission's conclusion: the group perished as a result of a natural disaster, most likely a snow avalanche. But many researchers and relatives disagree with this version, pointing to inconsistencies. Scientists continue to study photographs, records, and maps. Criminalists reanalyze clothing and body damage. Meteorologists study the weather conditions of that winter. But the more facts emerge, the more questions arise. What really happened on that February night in 1959? Was it a chain of tragic coincidences, or something beyond ordinary understanding? Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. Maybe something unusual happened first, a weapons test, a rare atmospheric phenomenon that triggered panic. Then the cold and bad weather did their work, turning a minor problem into a catastrophe. Or did the group encounter something completely unknown, something that still hides in the Ural forests? Dyatlov Pass continues to guard its secret. And perhaps that's for the best. Sometimes the mystery is more important than the solution. It makes us remember, doubt, and search. To remember 9 young lives cut short at the very beginning of their journey. To remember that nature is always more powerful than humans. And to remember that in our technological age, there remain places where reality proves more terrifying than any legend. What do you think? Which version seems most plausible to you? And should such mysteries be solved at all, or should some stories remain enigmas?